Welcome to Mangyongdae Funfair, North Korea's largest and most famous theme park. North Korea is hardly known for being on the cutting edge of leisure and entertainment, so it should be no surprise that the park appears a bit out of date. Indeed, most outside visitors describe North Korea as being aesthetically trapped in the 1960s, and Mangyongdae Funfair is no exception. The park is a perfect metaphor for the overall state of the Hermit Kingdom, at once demonstrating the Kim regime's taste for splendor while also symbolizing the country's decline over the last half-century. So how did circumstances get to this point in North Korea? And where does the Mangyongdae Funfair fit into all this? After World War II, the maps of countries around the world were hastily redrawn to reflect the new balance of power amongst the global superpowers. Korea had been released from the crumbling empire of Japan's control, being split into two distinct zones. America administered the South, whereas the Soviets gained influence over the North. As time went on, leader Kim Il-sung divorced himself from Soviet leadership while aligning his country to his newfound Juche ideology, a mishmash of Marxist ideals with a strong emphasis on loyalty to the leader, party, and country in that order. Juche's promotion of national sovereignty influenced the development of the North Korean state into the 1960s, when it was more economically stable than its southern counterpart. Rejecting outside influences became so central to Juche that the powers that be had effectively cut off North Korea from the rest of the world, leading to its nickname, the Hermit Kingdom. To this day, it is difficult for would-be tourists to visit the country, though as you will soon see, it is of course not wholly impossible. A developing North Korea continued to push modern luxuries throughout the 1970s to keep up with its geographic contemporaries. This included its rival in the South, which was finally seeing its own period of aggressive growth. An increased standard of living in North Korea demanded more leisure activities be made available to the citizens, and technological strides through the past 2 decades precipitated the creation of bigger and better facilities. Always a proud man, Supreme Leader Kim Il-sung saw this as a chance to answer the pleas of his people with a gift that proved he had their best interests at heart. And so, the Eternal President decreed that a new theme park be constructed beginning on December 13, 1981, with the plan being to open it on his 70th birthday. NKnews.org described his motivation as follows, quote, "The Mangyongdae Funfair is a cultural recreation ground for the people and an entertainment and educational center built by the great loving care and benevolence by President Kim Il-sung and leader Kim Jong-il, who were always considerate of providing the Korean people with more affluent and highly civilized life." Mangyongdae Funfair had its grand opening in April of 1982, though only half the park was available to guests at that point. Though preceded by the Taesongsan Funfair, which opened 5 years earlier, Mangyongdae was considered the finest amusement park in all of North Korea at its inception. The park occupied about 600,000 square meters of land, more than triple that of its older equivalent, and boasted a variety of dazzling attractions never before seen by the population. It was also slightly closer to the capital city, Pyongyang, being located in North Korea's famous Mangyongdae district. This ward is of special relevance to the North Korean canon, as it was the purported site of Eternal President Kim Il-sung's birth, and the neighborhood where he spent his childhood. In fact, Mangyongdae is considered so important that even now visitors are not allowed to chew gum, raise their voices, or wear flip-flops. State-produced literature about Mangyongdae Funfair claims a capacity of up to 100,000 guests, though this is rarely, if ever, met. The park's 2 sections are divided by a picturesque hill that can either be walked through or traveled via cable car. Those on foot can access a popular local lake where North Korean anglers often come to fish. Mangyongdae Funfair is home to a number of attractions, including a water park and what the locals call the Secret Zoo, as it often remains in the shadow of the better-known Pyongyang Central Zoo. The Secret Zoo is home to several domestic animals, like dogs, cats, and even guinea pigs. There is also an aviary where emus, doves, vultures, and other birds reside, with decorated ponds full of fountains that waterfowl can frisk about in. Also present are a series of gardens that run throughout, with park maps showing what appears to be one of North Korea's most symbolic flowers, the aptly named Kim Il-sungya. Another popular stop at Mangyongdae Funfair is the arcade. This game hall is said to include scores of different activities, most of which are familiar staples of Western midways. Among these are shooting ranges, coconut shies, and feats of strength type games. Many of these were built with anti-Western and anti-American imagery, as is often seen throughout North Korea. One fixture at Mangyongdae Funfair was its water park, which offered fan favorites like a water slide and river rapids. What early visitors were most dazzled by, however, were the seemingly cutting-edge thrill rides that populated the park. Promotional material for Mangyongdae Funfair was eager to highlight the canary yellow double-loop roller coaster, fittingly called the two-loop gravity train. It and its companion coaster, the one-loop gravity train, were constructed by the Japanese company Meisho Amusement Machines. Given the strong anti-Japanese attitudes prevalent in North Korea, it should be no surprise that identifying branding was removed. Apparently, construction of the roller coaster was overseen by the great Kim Il-sung himself. Another popular roller coaster at Mangyongdae is a wild mouse called the Kwan-song Tancha. More rides of note include a Ferris wheel, swinging ship, and a double-decker merry-go-round. Historic park literature depicts scores of North Korean guests enjoying the various attractions, most likely high-ranking party officials and other important members of the nation's hierarchy. Given that tourism from the West was essentially non-existent throughout the 1980s, it seems probable that the foreign guests shown were from friendly Eastern Bloc nations. All in all, travel brochures and other reading material suggests that Mangyongdae Funfair was a bustling and popular stop for vacationers in the Hermit Kingdom. Within a decade, however, the park's magnificence would be challenged by economic hardships that took North Korea by storm. Relations with the Soviet Union continued to break down throughout the 1980s. Whereas the former USSR had previously been all too happy to prop up the Kim regime through a combination of loans and favorable trade agreements, its own period of decline meant that North Korea would be cut off. The eventual breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991 had catastrophic effects on the North Korean economy, with energy and food imports drastically reduced. Though China managed to fill some of these niches, its own economic uncertainty meant North Korea had little wiggle room for any sort of luxury. What's more is that the great leader Kim Il-sung died in 1994, plunging the country into a lengthy mourning period where no form of merriment or entertainment was permitted. These factors seem to contribute to Mangyongdae Funfair falling into disrepair barely a decade out from its opening. With park budgets greatly slashed and workers barely able to keep food on the table, deterioration only accelerated. A new revenue stream for North Korea came in the form of Koryo Tours, a Chinese-based travel agency that offered Westerners the rare chance to visit North Korea starting in 1993. Mangyongdae Funfair would later become one of the destinations on these guided tours, though years of decline had already set in, making it an underwhelming experience compared to in its prime. Matters were certainly not helped when a hike in entry fees was introduced on July 1st, 2002, limiting the number of North Koreans who could afford a trip to the Funfair. This was somewhat countered a year later when special promotions celebrating the birth of leaders Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il were unveiled, allowing North Korean citizens free entry during these joyous occasions. The earliest Western accounts of visits to Mangyongdae Funfair started showing up online around 2007, often thanks to die-hard roller coaster enthusiasts who braved a trip to the Hermit Kingdom. First impressions were a stark contrast from the decades-old state-produced brochures, confirming the park was well past its prime. Still, Mangyongdae Funfair managed to attract its share of curious guests from around the world. Koryo Tours described the park as, quote, a place which can be busy with locals making the most of their time off, or completely deserted due to being somewhat inconveniently located at the edge of the city. They also pointed out that the Funfair's water park was usually closed due to unbeatable competition from the more popular Munsu water park. As Western visitors like journalist Alex Hoban saw Mangyongdae Funfair for themselves, the aging park's many shortcomings were clearer than ever. Writing for Vice magazine, Alex Hoban described Mangyongdae Funfair as, quote, the world's shittiest, most depressing quasi-theme park. He claimed that the tour bus full of Westerners were not allowed in until North Korean guests could populate the park. These guests, most of whom were farmers, were made to ride the attractions before allowing the Western group on, likely testing their safety. It also seemed that some rides were only turned on if Western guests were in the vicinity, as if to make the park seem much more bustling than it was. Travel expert Lindsay Fincher, who kindly allowed us use of her footage from Mangyongdae Funfair, told us, quote, a lot of the rides look like they could use some maintenance, or at the very least, a fresh coat of paint. As for what souvenirs were available, Fincher remembered, quote, there wasn't much merchandise for sale. All I can remember were cheap stuffed animals and plastic toys being sold from a cart. Not that different from what you'd find at a carnival in the West. The website Curiositus speculated that repairs have only ever been done at the Funfair when absolutely needed, like whenever foreign guests visit. As of mid-2011, many rides had not been updated since the park's opening, with questionable safety protocols more common in recent years. One of Lindsay Fincher's old blog posts spoke of this at length, writing, quote, I noticed that my shoulder harness wasn't locked. I could basically just raise and lower it at will. Some people had harnesses that locked, and some didn't. That was a bit odd, but whatever. This seemed like a pretty tame coaster. Until I saw there was a loop on this roller coaster, which, for whatever reason, none of us had seen until now. Now, I actually love upside-down roller coasters, but that is usually when there are, working safety harnesses. Such shortcomings didn't seem to bother the incumbent Supreme Leader Kim Jong-il, who visited the park frequently throughout his reign and often showered it with his admiration. The park would soon find itself the target of much criticism, though, following an unexpected regime change in late 2011. Kim Jong-un was proclaimed Supreme Leader of North Korea in the wake of his father's death 2 days before New Year's 2011. In his early years as Supreme Leader, Kim Jong-un made a point of touring various locations throughout his new domain. At the time, he had been making plans for better land use in North Korea to boost its standard of living. The younger Kim was thoroughly underwhelmed by the state of Mangyongdae Funfair, condemning it as, quote, pathetic. On state television, he could be seen giving the park operators hell for letting it slip into such a state of disrepair. Among the things the Supreme Leader had pointed out were the poor state of the park's gardens and pathways, along with the questionable safety of its rides. Kim believed this demonstrated a, quote, below-zero spirit of serving the people, and that this needed to change. He went on to offer suggestions on how it ought to be landscaped, like arranging gravel stone pits in various shapes near the park's evergreen trees. The Telegraph reports that Kim considered this a project of such importance that it required a vice marshal from the People's Army to oversee renovations. The affair was said to not just be a matter of business, but of ideological consistency. Indeed, the park was representative of the greater North Korean zeitgeist, so it was expected to meet high standards. One expert from South Korea saw this as a means of Kim Jong-un establishing himself to his people. Quote, I think that going to the Mangyongdae playground and scolding the person in charge is a gesture to show that Kim Jong-un is a leader who cares a lot about the people. Kim Jong-un's vow to restore the park to a higher standard appears to have been followed through on. Mangyongdae Funfair enjoyed its official reopening on October 9, 2012, the same year a brand new theme park named Rungna People's Pleasure Ground opened. The standard praise about the indomitable spirit of North Korea was the main focal point for the reopening ceremony, crediting socialist values as the source of this revolutionary change in amusement park management. One source touted that as many as 50 new rides and attractions were added, though this large figure is difficult to ascertain. The restored Mangyongdae Funfair was quickly put to good use. In 2013, the park was host to a Children's Day military parade that saw thousands of children don army uniforms as they played with toy vehicles and weapons. There was even a contest to build models of a rocket launched by the military the previous year. Koryo Travel Group wrote in 2020 that despite restoration efforts, Mangyongdae Funfair is now rarely open, and when it is, many of the rides are inoperable. Their recommendation was to visit on summer weekends or on any of the many national holidays celebrating North Korea and its leaders. In more recent years, Mangyongdae Funfair has been overshadowed by the other amusement parks open throughout Pyongyang, like the far more developed Kaesun Youth Park, which offers more contemporary rides. The park still sees use, though, as a meeting place for business luncheons and more. Recent upgrades include a new gymnasium and athletic complex, where ping pong tables and a public bath can be found, along with more unusual activities like inflatable plastic bubbles that users can bump around in. Mangyongdae Funfair, along with a handful of other North Korean sites, was at the center of a controversial 2022 campaign by the North Korean government to mandate vacations for people during the hot summer months. Apparently, vouchers had been issued for parks like Mangyongdae Funfair, though individual businesses still had to pay for them. Daily NK wrote, quote, "In effect, North Koreans are being forced to visit resorts against their wishes." Though the intent was to demonstrate relaxing public health measures, many impoverished workers who struggled with even purchasing food found it a wildly out-of-touch proposal. Of course, this wasn't up for debate, and the party urged the workers that this move was in their best interest. As is typical of North Korea, it is difficult to find up-to-date information about the state of Mangyongdae Funfair. Though we have plenty of Western accounts to go off of from before the renovation, how exactly the park has improved since Kim Jong-un's dressing down in the early 2010s remains mostly ambiguous outside of state-produced media. Complicating matters is the fact that North Korea's border has remained shut to outsiders since January 22, 2020, days after it was confirmed that the pandemic had reached South Korea. The Supreme Leader's insistence that the park be revitalized reflects the importance the Kim family places on keeping up appearances to maintain ideological purity within their realm, even if everything else behind the scenes is, shall we say, less than stellar. And park signage reflects this. Rather than ride names, messages like, "Glory to our dear leader," are often what's plastered above the coasters and other attractions. Despite its relative obscurity outside of the Hermit Kingdom, Mangyongdae Funfair does have somewhat of an international following. It's even been recreated by one player of the game, Roller Coaster Tycoon. With newer parks in the country superseding Mangyongdae Funfair in both quality and notoriety, it will be interesting to see how the site manages in the coming years after the regime reopens the borders. At this time, I'd like to thank, on behalf of the Anomaly team, everyone who made this video possible, including Lindsay Fincher, Ray Cunningham, and of course, Richard Bannister. Richard has produced a new card game app called Superior Solitaire, which offers enthusiasts 18 playstyles, infinite levels of undo, and spectacular interchangeable background graphics. This is all without any in-app purchases, online tracking, or bothersome advertisements. If you want to support Anomaly and those who help bring it to life, I highly recommend you check out this incredibly affordable app on your device's store feature, or on superiorsolitaire.com. As always, thanks for watching.